The air in the Confederacy War Council chamber was colder than the vacuum of space outside. It was a silence born not of peace, but of profound failure. 10 figures, the most powerful military minds of a dozen star systems, sat around a grand holographic table, their faces bathed in the cold blue light of defeat. On the table, a map of the outer rim pulsed with grim icons. One, however, did not pulse. The symbol for the colony world of Cerelia, a vibrant green dot just hours ago, was now being consumed by a creeping violet stain. The icon flickered, turned a dead gray, and then vanished. Erased. The stain, designated the Scourge, expanded its border by a fraction. "Signal lost," a disembodied voice announced from the ceiling. "Cerelia is gone." The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Gone. Not conquered, not occupied. Eaten. Digested by the relentless planet-devouring entity that had been chewing through the Confederacy's borders for 3 standard years. Fleet Mistress Yvonne, her scaled knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the table, broke the silence. Her voice was like grinding gravel. "Losses." An admiral with 4 weary eyes looked up. The entire 7th Fleet. They were ineffective. The Scourge's new tactic nullified their shields before they could even return fire. They were torn apart in minutes. Archon Valerius, a tall, thin being whose pristine white robe seemed out of place in the grim war room, scoffed. Ineffective? They were obliterated. This is what happens when we rely on technology over doctrine. Your doctrines are failing just as badly, Archon, Yvonne shot back, her gaze sharp. The Scourge doesn't care for our traditions. At the far end of the table, away from the others, sat High-Technician Kaelen. He was a survivor from Xylos, one of the first worlds to fall, and he carried the ghost of his lost home in his haunted, unblinking eyes. In his hand, hidden beneath the table, he gripped a small, twisted piece of metal, a fragment from his family's shuttle. He hadn't said a word for the entire meeting, his attention fixed on the violet stain that had swallowed his past and was now threatening to consume their future. He watched as the Scourge's drones, grotesque amalgams of metal and bone, had swarmed Cerelia's defenses, their movements unnaturally fast, like puppets on a string. A portly general suggested a strategic withdrawal to fortify the core worlds. Another proposed sacrificing the entire quadrant to buy time. Hope was a currency they no longer possessed. Then Kaelen spoke. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the room's despair like a blade. There is another option. All eyes turned to him. It was the first time he had offered anything but data and damage reports. Archon Valerius looked down his nose at him. A new weapon, technician? Another shield frequency that will fail in a week? No, Kaelen said, his eyes still locked on the holomap. A new kind of weapon. A biological one. He took a slow breath. I propose we investigate designation 734. A wave of shock and disgust rippled through the room. Humanity? Valerius spat the word like poison. You cannot be serious. We are talking about a feral species, a quarantined plague. They are violent, chaotic, self-destructive primitives who have never known a single day of peace. We would be better off inviting the Scourge for dinner. Their violence is the point, Archon, Kaelen replied, his voice still flat, betraying no emotion. The Scourge wins because it is logical. It analyzes our technology, our tactics, and it adapts perfectly. It is a flawless predator. He finally lifted his gaze, and for the first time the other saw a flicker of fire in his dead eyes. But you cannot predict chaos, and designation 734 is the very definition of chaos. Heresy! Valerius stood, his robes flowing around him. To even consider unleashing such vermin upon the galaxy is an insult to every life the Scourge has taken. I forbid it. You forbid nothing, Fleet Mistress Yvonne's voice boomed, silencing the Archon. She stood and leaned over the table, her shadow falling upon Kaelen. She looked tired, beaten, but her spirit was not broken. She was a warrior cornered, and a cornered warrior is the most dangerous kind. Dogma will not save us. Tradition will not save us. The Scourge is at our throat. We are out of options, out of time, and out of hope. She turned her hard gaze to Kaelen. Find me a weapon, technician. I don't care how ugly it is. Kaelen's data sanctum was a dark circular room, the only light coming from the holographic interfaces that swirled around him like captive ghosts. He had been granted limited access to Earth's archives, a chaotic flood of information that had been broadcast into space for centuries, a planetary scream of joy, rage, and confusion. For 3 days he did not sleep. He let the data wash over him, trying to find a pattern in the madness. At first, all he saw was what the Council feared. He watched footage of their world wars, millions of soldiers charging into machine gun fire, cities turned to rubble, mushroom clouds blooming over entire populations. It was everything Valerius had said: savage, senseless, self-destructive. But then he started to look deeper. He saw the image of a soldier, his face grim with terror, charging into a hail of bullets. Then he cross-referenced the data and saw another image, a firefighter, his face grim with determination, charging into a burning building to save a child. The same action, the same risk, one for destruction, one for salvation. He watched a brutal mixed martial arts fighter beat an opponent into unconsciousness. Then he saw footage from a hospital where a surgeon's hands, just as steady and precise, worked for 18 hours to save the life of a single unknown person. He saw a mosh pit at a heavy metal concert, a chaotic swirl of bodies slamming into each other with violent energy. Minutes later, the archive showed him a video of a traffic accident, where that same kind of chaotic crowd worked together as one, lifting a multi-ton vehicle off a trapped victim with their bare hands. Destruction and creation, violence and compassion, chaos and cooperation. They were not contradictions. They were two sides of the same coin. He realized the Confederacy had been looking at them all wrong. They weren't just a species that waged war. They were a species that thrived in crisis. Pressure didn't break them. It forged them into something stronger. Their greatest technological leaps, rocketry, nuclear power, computing, all came from the crucible of their deadliest conflicts. They didn't just fight their enemies. They fought nature. They fought disease. They fought their own limitations. They climbed impossible mountains for fun. They strapped themselves to rockets and aimed for the moon, armed with little more than slide rules and raw courage. Kaelen leaned back, the holographic images reflecting in his wide eyes. He finally understood. The Scourge was a perfect engine of logic. Humanity was a beautiful, terrifying engine of chaos. You don't fight a flawless calculator with a better calculator. You fight it by throwing a rock into its delicate gears. He shut down the archives, the silence of his sanctum returning. He now had the answer for Fleet Mistress Ivan. He had found her weapon. It was ugly. It was dangerous. It might be the very thing that destroyed them all. But it was also their only chance.
When Kaelen re-entered the War Council chamber, the oppressive silence had been replaced by the low murmur of desperate arguments. The same admirals and generals were now debating futile strategies with renewed, hopeless energy. They fell silent as the doors hissed shut behind him. Every eye turned to the lone technician. He was no longer the quiet ghost at the end of the table. 3 days in the human archives had burned away his haunted emptiness, replacing it with a terrifying, focused intensity. "You ask for a weapon, Fleet Mistress," Kaelen said, his voice ringing with newfound authority. He walked to the center of the room and placed his data slate on the main console. "I have found one." With a flick of his fingers, he seized control of the grand holotable. The grim map of their losing war vanished, replaced by a stunning high-definition video. It showed a lush green canyon on a sunlit world. A moment later, a small humanoid figure leapt from a cliff edge. Gasps filled the room. The figure wasn't falling, it was flying, clad in a suit with fabric wings, soaring through the narrow canyon at impossible speeds, inches from certain death. "What is this?" Archon Valerius demanded. "A suicide ritual?" "No," Kaelen said calmly, letting the video play. "This is a recreational activity. They call it wingsuit flying. It is a simulation of surviving an unsurvivable situation. They do this for pleasure." He swiped his hand. A new set of images flooded the display. A human covered in mud crawling under barbed wire, another lifting a ridiculously heavy weight, their face a mask of pain. A third running across a scorching desert, their body at the very edge of collapse. Their bodies are tools designed and trained to endure punishment far beyond the limits of most known sentient species. They inflict pain on themselves willingly to make themselves harder, stronger. He changed the display again. Now it showed scenes of intense, almost tribal loyalty. Soldiers carrying their wounded comrades through explosions and gunfire. Firefighters forming a human chain to rescue people from a flood. A team of athletes celebrating a victory, crying and hugging with a fierce devotion that was unsettling in its intensity. "This is the core of their strength," Kaelen explained. "Pack bonding. In moments of extreme duress, the survival of the group becomes more important than the survival of the self. This instinct is so powerful it can override their own logic and fear. They will die for each other without hesitation." "They will die for each other," Valerius sneered. "They will not die for us." "That is a risk we must manage," Kaelen conceded, before moving to his central point. The image of the brutal cage fight appeared again. "We have seen this. We called it savage. We were wrong." He isolated the video, slowing it down. He highlighted the referee who monitored the fight. He highlighted the rules that, while brutal, prevented permanent injury or death. Then he showed the end of the fight, where the two bloodied combatants, exhausted, helped each other up and embraced in a show of mutual respect. "This is not senseless violence," Kaelen declared, his voice rising. "This is a problem-solving exercise with immediate physical consequences. They are testing each other, learning, adapting in real time. To them, this is a sport. To me, it is the purest form of combat evolution I have ever witnessed." Now he unleashed his final argument. The war footage returned, but framed by his new perspective.
He showed a flimsy biplane from their First World War, then a sleek supersonic jet, then a massive chemical rocket straining to leave its planet's atmosphere. Their history of conflict is not a flaw. It is their engine. Their greatest periods of war are their greatest periods of innovation. They built their path to the stars on a ladder of weapons. Peace makes them stagnant. Crisis makes them brilliant. The Confederacy has known peace for so long we have forgotten how to truly fight. Humans have never been allowed that luxury. The universe has been their forge, and war has been their hammer. He turned off the display, plunging the room back into the cold blue emergency light. He faced the council, his eyes burning. The Scourge is perfect logic. We cannot outthink it. It will always predict our ordered logical response. But we can unleash a variable it cannot compute. We can introduce an element so chaotic, so adaptable, and so brutally resilient that it will break the Scourge's predictive models. We can fight their perfect logic with our own theoral variable. The chamber exploded into outrage. "Madness!" an admiral shouted. "He wants to invite the wolves into our home to fight the monster at the door," another added. Archon Valerius rose to his full height, his face a mask of fury and contempt. "This is beyond heresy. It is insanity. The technician has clearly been driven mad by his grief. He wants to cure a plague by infecting us with another, more volatile one. These things, they are animals. You give them a ship, they will turn its weapons on us the moment it serves their selfish needs. They are a cancer, Kaelen, and you are asking us to welcome it into our very heart." Kaelen stood his ground, unflinching against the tide of anger. It was Fleet Mistress Yvonne who silenced them all. She rose slowly, the weight of 1,000 lost worlds on her shoulders. "The Archon is right," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Every general in the room froze. "It is a terrible risk. These humans sound like everything we have defined as uncivilized. They could be our end." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "However," she continued, her voice hardening, "the Scourge is not a risk. It is a certainty. It is the end happening, right now, in slow motion. We are currently debating the color of the curtains while our house is burning to the ground." She locked her gaze with Valerius. "Your purity has given us nothing but well-documented defeats, Archon. Your doctrines have led our fleets into meticulously recorded slaughters." Finally she turned to Kaelen, her expression a mix of grim resolve and reluctant hope. "We will not unleash a horde. That would be suicide. But your analysis of them as a tool, a scalpel, as you said, that has merit." She made her decision. The room held its breath. "We will approve a single top-secret mission, codename Project Chimera. You will lead it, Technician. You will go to this Earth, and you will acquire a single team, the most effective, most representative team you can find. You will bring them back for a test, a live-fire mission that our own forces cannot accomplish." Her voice dropped, becoming as cold as iron. "If they succeed, we will consider further action. If they fail, or if they show even a hint of betrayal, I will personally give the order to sterilize their entire solar system. Make sure they understand those stakes." She looked at Kaelen, a silent question in her eyes. Kaelen simply nodded. "They will understand. It's the only kind of language they've ever known."
The journey to the Sol system was a silent, sterile affair. High-Technician Kaelen's ship, the Stasis, moved through the void with the flawless grace of all Confederate technology. It was a vessel designed for research and diplomacy, a place of quiet order and logic. That order was the first casualty of meeting humanity. As the stasis dropped out of fold space, Earth appeared on the main viewer, a swirl of brilliant blue, stark white, and living green, a chaotic jewel. Kaelen had expected to initiate the Confederacy's formal First Contact Protocol, a narrow beam transmission of mathematical constants and peaceful greetings. Instead, his ship was instantly flooded, not with weapons fire, but with noise. A tidal wave of chaotic, primitive electromagnetic signals washed over them. The comms officer, a being whose species communicated through subtle light shifts, flickered in panic. "Sir, I'm detecting everything. Hundreds of thousands of audio and video broadcasts, all unprotected. Music, political arguments, stories about fictional characters, videos of small felines." Kaelen silenced him with a raised hand. This was the chaos he had studied. This was humanity, screaming its existence into the void for anyone to hear. The official greeting, when it came, was not from a diplomatic vessel. It was a massive, ugly orbital defense platform, bristling with what looked like oversized kinetic cannons. A gruff male voice crackled over the main speaker, bypassing all formal channels. "Unidentified vessel, this is Orbital Command Platform Leonidas. You are in restricted space. State your business and identity, or we will turn your fancy ship into shiny debris. You have 60 seconds. Kaelen stepped forward. "This is High-Technician Kaelen of the Confederate vessel Stasis. We represent the Galactic Confederacy. We come in peace with a matter of urgent mutual importance to discuss." There was a long pause. The voice on the other end chuckled, a dry, scratchy sound. "The Galactic Confederacy, huh? All right, E.T. You've got our attention. Hold your position. We're deciding who gets to talk to the new aliens." The deciding took 3 hours. During that time, the stasis was scanned by dozens of different military and civilian systems with what Kaelen's sensors identified as brute force, high-energy methods. It was like being examined with a hammer instead of a scalpel. Finally, a human general appeared on screen. His face was stern, his uniform decorated with medals, but his eyes held a weary pragmatism. "Kaelen," the general began, skipping all honorifics. "I'm General Marcus Thorne. We reviewed your peaceful request. You mentioned a mutual existential threat. Our intelligence has been tracking an anomaly on the galactic rim, a scourge, as your data packets call it. We're listening." Kaelen explained the situation, omitting the Confederacy's desperation, but emphasizing the Scourge's unstoppable nature and its new EMP capabilities. He formally requested humanity's most effective problem solvers for a joint consultation. Thorne was silent for a long moment. Then, "We don't send diplomats into a potential war zone, technician. We sent soldiers. You'll get your problem solvers, but be warned, our best are not polite." An hour later, a human ship detached from the Leonidas station. It was the opposite of the stasis in every way. Where the stasis was a sleek, pearlescent teardrop, the human ship was an ugly, asymmetrical block of dark metal, covered with scars, modifications, and oversized engine thrusters. The name painted crudely on its hull read Mongrel. It approached and docked with the stasis not with a silent magnetic clamp, but with a solid, jarring thump that echoed through the pristine Confederate vessel. Kaelen and a small ceremonial honor guard stood waiting at the main airlock, their posture perfect, their uniforms immaculate. The airlock hissed open. Task Force Fenrir had arrived. The first one through was their leader, Colonel Jax Warden Riggs. He was of average height, with graying hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from old, tired stone. His eyes, however, were sharp and missed nothing. He wore a simple, functional combat uniform, not dress attire. He ignored the guards and walked directly to Kaelen, extending a hand. "Colonel Riggs, you must be the alien in charge." Kaelen, after a moment's hesitation, carefully gripped the offered hand with his three-fingered manipulator, mimicking the gesture he had seen in the archives. The human's grip was firm and warm. Behind Riggs came the rest of his pack. A shorter figure with a dark hood pulled low over their face, their eyes darting around, scanning the ship's architecture, was Glitch. A mountain of a man, easily a head taller than Riggs, followed. He carried a massive, heavy gear bag over one shoulder and simply nodded at Kaelen. This was Bulk. The last one through was Jester, a pilot with a wild grin who immediately broke the sterile silence. "Whoa, nice ship. You guys ever hear of the color blue or, fun?" The walk to their assigned quarters was a study in contrasts. The Confederate guards moved in perfect, silent synchronicity. Fenrir sprawled. Jester whistled a tune from some ancient rock band. Bulk occasionally tapped on a wall panel, his knuckles making a solid thud as if to test its integrity. Glitch muttered to herself about the ship's inefficient data protocols and lazy encryption on the non-essential networks. Riggs walked beside Kaelen. "So," the colonel said, his voice low, "an alien race on the verge of extinction needs a few good monsters to help fight a bigger monster. Did I get that right?" Kaelen was taken aback by the blunt accuracy. "Your assessment, while crude, is not entirely incorrect." "Good," Riggs grunted. "I like it when things are simple." They reached the guest quarters. The rooms were perfect, sterile white cubes with a recessed bed and a simple data interface. The Confederate guards bowed stiffly and departed. The moment the door closed, Fenrir transformed the space. Bulk unzipped his huge bag and began assembling a massive kinetic slug rifle on the floor, the metallic clicks echoing in the silent room. Jester pulled a small battered audio speaker from his pack. A moment later, the loud, aggressive chords of a guitar riff blasted through the quarters and into the corridor, causing a passing Confederate officer to flinch in alarm. Glitch had already jacked a custom interface into the wall panel and was typing furiously on a holographic keyboard, a grin on her face. "Their public network security is a joke," she announced to no one in particular. Riggs pulled a dented metal flask from his jacket pocket, uncapped it, and took a long swallow. He held it out to Kaelen. "Want some? It's whiskey. Puts hair on your chest." Kaelen stared at the container of ethanol poison, utterly baffled. I must decline. My species does not have hair." Later that cycle, Kaelen sat alone in his observation chamber, watching the security feeds from Fenrir's quarters. The humans had turned the pristine rooms into their den. Music was playing, weapons were being cleaned, and Jester was trying to teach Bulk a card game. It was a whirlwind of controlled chaos that violated dozens of Confederate regulations on noise, unauthorized hardware, and personal conduct. He felt a mix of profound terror and a strange, undeniable fascination. He had wanted a weapon, a feral variable, and now it was living on his ship. He opened his personal log, his 3 fingers tapping on the console. Log entry, Project Chimera. The subjects have been acquired. My initial analysis was correct. They are loud, undisciplined, and disrespectful of protocol. They are not soldiers in any way the Confederacy would understand. He paused, watching as Riggs laughed at something Jester said, a rare, genuine smile. "They are a pack." He typed, finishing the entry. "And they have made our ship their new territory."
For 2 weeks, the Stasis was a vessel caught between 2 worlds. By day, Kaelen attempted to brief Task Force Fenrir on the Scourge. He would stand before a massive, complex holographic display showing the creature's biological makeup, its growth patterns, its crystalline structure.
He spoke of cellular division and energy absorption. And the humans, for the most part, did not listen in the way he expected. Colonel Riggs would sit at the table, methodically disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling his kinetic sidearm, his eyes never leaving his work. Bulk would often be in the corner of the briefing room, doing silent, strenuous pull-ups from a support beam. Jester would be slouched in his chair, playing a simple game on his personal datapad, the cheerful pings a constant source of irritation for Kaelen. Only Glitch seemed to pay attention, but her focus was on critiquing Kaelen's methods. "Your data compression is a nightmare," she'd mutter from under her hood. "I could cut your file sizes by 60%. And why are you using a radial threat analysis? A nodal progression model would be far more predictive." Kaelen grew increasingly frustrated. He saw their behavior as a profound lack of discipline, a disrespect for the apocalyptic threat they faced. He didn't understand that this was how they coped, how they prepared. Riggs through the muscle memory of his weapon, Bulk through physical readiness, Jester by staying loose and deflecting the tension, and Glitch by deconstructing the problem into data she could manage. His attempt to explain the Scourge's cellular structure was interrupted by the one sound that could command even Fenrir's absolute attention, the piercing shriek of a Priority 1 alarm. The briefing room's calm lighting was replaced by flashing red emergency strobes. On the main screen, the regal face of Fleet Mistress Yvonne appeared, her image flickering with subspace interference. "Kaelen," her voice was sharp, strained. "Priority situation. We've lost contact with Research Station Xylos in the Triton Nebula. They were analyzing captured Scourge samples. Their last transmission was a standard distress call. Then, silence." Kaelen's blood ran cold. Xylos was their most advanced biological research facility, home to their top xenobiologists. "Colonel Riggs," Yvonne continued, her eyes finding the human commander, "your test has been moved up. The stasis is to proceed to Xylos immediately. Your mission is to investigate the station, assess the threat, and, if possible, determine the fate of the research team. This is no longer a simulation. Show me what your chaos can do." The screen went blank. A new tension filled the ship. The casual disrespect was gone, replaced by a quiet, focused professionalism. Fenrir moved with purpose, heading to their gear lockers. The test was over. The hunt had begun. The stasis dropped out of fold space at the edge of the Triton Nebula. The view was wrong. Xylos Station, a massive wheel-shaped structure, should have been a beacon of brilliant white light. Instead, it was dark, adrift, and it was diseased. Great, ugly patches of the shimmering black-violet Scourge lattice clung to its hull like a cancerous growth. "The station is powered down," the Confederate helm officer reported, her voice trembling, "but I'm detecting faint energy readings from those growths." "Move us closer," Kaelen ordered. "Use the long-range scanners. I want to know what that is." The stasis glided forward, and the trap was sprung. There was no explosion, no weapon fire. There was only a sudden violent lurch. The constant, reassuring hum of the ship's advanced reactor died, replaced by a high-pitched, agonizing whine. The lights didn't just flicker, they shattered, plunging the bridge into near-total darkness, save for the red emergency strobes. The main holographic display collapsed into a waterfall of static. Alarms blared, not in organized patterns, but in a discordant, dying scream. "Shields are gone, weapons offline, propulsion is failing." Panic began to set in. The perfect logical Confederate vessel had been crippled in an instant. But Kaelen had seen the energy readings for a split second before the system crashed. It wasn't an attack targeting the ship. It was a field. An invisible wall. He stumbled to a backup console, his mind racing.
It's not a weapon targeting the ship, he breathed, a horrifying realization dawning on him. It's the station itself. The lattice. It's emitting a massive electromagnetic field pattern, a dead zone for high technology. They've evolved a way to disable our greatest advantage. Just then, a calm voice cut through the chaos of the bridge. It came not from the ship's speakers, but from Kaelen's personal hardened comm unit. "Kaelen, what's your status?" "Riggs here." The colonel's voice was perfectly clear, backed by the faint sound of Jester's rock music. "Our section's dark, but our backup power is on. Gear is green across the board. Feels like a bad storm back on Earth. What the hell happened?" The reversal was absolute. The advanced alien was helpless in his dying ship. The primitive human was calm and in control. "It's an EMP field, Colonel," Kaelen explained, his voice tight with a new urgency. "A powerful one. It disables any sufficiently advanced networked technology. Our shields, our weapons, they're useless." He looked at the dead station on the viewer, at the creeping violet infection, the scientists, Dr. Ares, the research. And then it hit him, a revelation so crucial it felt like a physical blow. "Colonel," he said, his voice dropping, "this mission just changed. Xylos wasn't just any research station. It was our primary facility for developing countermeasures against the Scourge. The lead scientist, Dr. Ares, he was working on a prototype. He called it a shield harmonic, a device designed to retune our shields to nullify exactly this kind of energy warfare." He turned to look at the comm unit as if he could see Riggs through it. "That data, that prototype, is our only hope of fighting back. It must be on that station." The mission was no longer about investigation. It was a heist, a smash and grab into the heart of an energy dead zone, onto a station infested with a physically dominant enemy, to retrieve the one piece of technology that could save the entire Confederacy. There was a short pause on the other end of the line. Kaelen could hear Riggs relaying the information to his team. He heard Bulk grunt and Glitch say something about brute force frequency disruption. Then Riggs's voice came back, devoid of any panic, filled only with cold, hard purpose. A crippled station, a new enemy weapon, and a single objective with the fate of the galaxy riding on it, the colonel said. "Sounds like our kind of party. Glitch, Jester, Bulk, suit up. We're going in."
"Colonel, standard docking is impossible." Kaelen's strained voice crackled over the mongrel's short-range radio. On the shuttle's bridge, the advanced holographic displays were dead, but the old-fashioned, rugged screens flickered to life on backup power. "The station's docking clamps are offline. You have no way to attach." In the pilot's seat, Jester let out a whoop of laughter. "Doc, where we're going, we don't need docking clamps." He gripped the controls, the shuttle's chemical thrusters roaring to life with a raw power that made the whole vessel shake. "All right, Fenrir, hang on to your butts. The mongrel is off the leash." The ugly, tough-as-nails shuttle shot away from the crippled stasis, a bulldog charging into a graveyard. On the main viewer, Xylos station grew larger, a tombstone adrift in the nebula's ghostly light. The black-violet Scourge lattice pulsed faintly on its hull, and the air craggled with a silent, invisible storm of EMP energy. "No way to dock," Riggs said, his voice calm as he checked the breach charges on his belt. "Jester, see that main hangar bay, the big double doors?" "Affirmative, Warden," Jester replied, his grin audible over the comms. "Looks thin. You want me to knock or just kick the door in?" "Kick it in," Riggs ordered. From the stasis, Kaelen's voice was a horrified gasp. "Colonel, you can't. That will compromise the entire deck's atmosphere, the pressure change." "The station is already dead, Doc. We're just kicking in the door to the morgue. Jester, make it loud." Jester pushed the throttle to maximum. Loud it is. The mongrel didn't slow down. It aimed its reinforced nose directly at the hangar doors and accelerated. The impact was cataclysmic, a screech of tortured metal and a shower of brilliant yellow sparks. The shuttle smashed through the doors, using its own mass as a battering ram. It skidded across the hangar deck in a storm of debris and came to a grinding halt in the eerie darkness. The rear ramp slammed down before the ship had even fully stopped. "Go! Go! Go!" Riggs yelled. Task Force Fenrir charged out into the vast, silent hangar. The only light came from the red emergency strobes and the faint, sickly purple glow of the Scourge lattice crawling across the far walls. The low, chittering hum of the growth was a constant, unnerving presence. They didn't have to wait long. Figures began to pull themselves out of the lattice on the walls. They were abominations. One had the sleek leg of a Confederate security drone fused to a torso of melted deck plating, its head a jagged cluster of communication antennae. Another was a four-legged horror made from lab equipment and the skeletal remains of some large creature. Whip-like filaments of violent energy connected them to the main lattice, their movements fast and jerky. "Contact," Boat's voice boomed. He knelt and braced his heavy kinetic machine gun. The weapon erupted with a deafening roar, spitting a stream of high-velocity tungsten slugs. The rounds, immune to the EMP, tore through the amalgam drones, shattering their makeshift bodies into shrapnel. The sound was deafening, a stark contrast to the silent energy weapons of the Confederacy. Riggs and Jester, armed with assault rifles and a shotgun, flanked him, laying down suppression fire. Glitch stayed behind them, her datapad already active, its screen showing a blueprint of the station. "Lab is 3 levels down, deck Gamma, this way." They fought their way through the darkened corridors. The station was a charnel house. They found a small group of 7 Confederate survivors huddled in a mess hall, their useless plasma rifles clutched in their hands. Their leader, a young science officer, saw Fenrir and raised his weapon. He pulled the trigger, the rifle let out a pathetic fizz and died. "Ours don't do that," Riggs said gruffly, shoving a spare kinetic pistol into the officer's hands. "Point, shoot, reload. Try to keep up." The journey to Deck Gamma was a running gunfight. The Scourge drones were relentless, pouring out of vents and walls. Bulk was a walking fortress, his machine gun acting as a battering ram of pure force. Jester was a whirlwind of motion, his shotgun blasting at close range. Riggs moved with deadly efficiency, placing precise, controlled bursts into the weak points Glitch called out. They were a symphony of destruction, and the silent, dead station was their concert hall. They finally blasted their way into Dr. Ares' primary research lab. It was a scene of carnage, half overrun by the lattice. In the center of the room, they found the scientist's body near a heavily fortified, old-fashioned physical vault. "He secured it," Glitch breathed, relief in her voice. "It's a mechanical lock. The Scourge couldn't open it." "Get it open," Riggs ordered, as he and Bulk took up positions at the doorway. "Buy her time." A wave of drones swarmed the corridor. Bulk roared as he opened fire, the spent shell casings creating a golden carpet at his feet. As Glitch worked frantically on the thick vault door, the chittering hum intensified. The lattice on the walls began to spread faster, visibly crawling across the floor towards them. With a loud clang, the vault swung open. Glitch scrambled inside and emerged a second later, holding a heavy, shielded data core. "Got it!" she yelled. "This is the harmonic data!" At that exact moment, the entire wall opposite them exploded inward. A new monstrosity filled the breach, blocking their only exit. It was massive, at least 3 times the size of the other drones. Built from the station's main communications array, it towered over them, a giant of twisted metal and alien purpose. The lattice spread like lightning from its wheat, sealing the doorway behind them. They were trapped. They were low on ammo. The new drone was advancing. "No way out the way we came," Jester grunted, reloading his shotgun.
Riggs didn't panic. His tired eyes scanned the room, the enemy, the tactical display on his wrist. Glitch, schematics, where is the main reactor core relative to our position? 2 decks directly below us, Colonel, she replied, her fingers flying. Kaelen's voice screamed over the radio from the stasis. Colonel, what are you thinking? You can't. The resulting explosion will destroy everything. That's the plan, Doc, Riggs said calmly. He looked at Glitch again. And the nearest primary waste ejection port. 60 meters down that maintenance corridor, she said, pointing. Bulk, your remaining breach charges. Get us to that corridor, and then I want you to drop the rest down the reactor conduit. You want to blow the whole house down? Bulk asked with a grim smile. We're not just blowing the door, we're taking out the trash. What followed was pure adrenaline-fueled chaos. Bulk's charge blasted a new exit for us into a dark maintenance tunnel. We sprinted through it, the entire station now vibrating around them as the Scourge sensed their plan. Behind them, we heard the massive drone smashing its way in pursuit. They reached the waste disposal bay. It was a large chamber with a huge circular airlock door leading to open space. Riggs looked at his team. Jester, you're on comms. Tell the mongrel our exit point is about to get real obvious. Everyone else, prepare for vacuum. As Glitch frantically worked to override the airlock's safety protocols, Bulk ripped open a service panel and dropped his remaining explosives down a deep shaft marked reactor coolant. He set the timer. 30 seconds, he yelled. The outer door slid open with a deafening groan. The cold, star-dusted void of space lay before them. Go! Riggs ordered, physically shoving the terrified Confederate scientist he'd saved out into the black. Jump! One by one, they leapt into the abyss. Just outside, Jester was fighting for our lives, the mongrel's cannon spitting fire at Jones crawling on the station's hull. With incredible skill, he maneuvered the shuttle, using its articulated grappling arms to snatch the free-floating members of Fenrir out of space. Bulk was the last one on the edge. He turned and fired his machine gun one last time down the corridor at the massive drone that had just broken through before leaping into space himself. Jester grabbed him with the claw and hit the main thrusters. Got them all! Going hot! He yelled. The mongrel rocketed away from the dying station. Behind them, Xylos began to glow from within, its structure buckling. Then, in absolute, beautiful silence, it detonated. A new man-made star bloomed in the Triton Nebula, a brilliant flash of light that vaporized the Scourge infestation, the station, and all the horrors within. It was a funeral pyre and a victory flag, all in one.
The journey back to the stasis was a strange one. The mongrel, battered and scarred, limped through space, its interior a mess of spent shell casings and discarded medical supplies. The rescued Confederate scientists huddled together, looking at Task Force Fenrir with a mixture of terror and awe. Jester was humming his rock music, tapping his fingers on the controls. Bulk was silently cleaning his massive machine gun, a calming ritual. On the radio, Kaelen's voice was different. The horror was gone, replaced by a profound, stunned respect. Colonel, your methods are unorthodox. But they work, Doc. That's all that matters. When they docked with the crippled stasis, the reception was not one of ceremony, but of silent reverence. The Confederate crew lined the corridor, not as an honor guard, but simply to see the beings who had walked into the jaws of death and come back with a miracle. They looked at the 4 humans, no longer as primitives or savages, but as saviors. Kaelen met them at the airlock. He looked at Riggs, at the scorch marks on his armor and the exhaustion in his eyes. You have retrieved the data, Kaelen stated, the words feeling inadequate. Just doing our job, Riggs grunted. He nodded toward Glitch, who was already striding towards the bridge, the hardened data core clutched in her hand. Ship's network is a mess, she muttered, bypassing, routing through the emergency subspace beacon. Done. Sending the package to Fleet Command. Hope it gets there in time. Hard cut to the bridge of the Confederate flagship CVS Indomitable, Sector Gamma.
Hell was a place of shrieking alarms and the groaning of dying metal. Fleet Mistress Yvonne stood on the bridge of her flagship, her hands gripping a console so hard her knuckles were bone white. On the main viewer, 3 massive Scourge arc seeds blotted out the stars, surrounded by a swarm of thousands of drones. The Indomitable was dying. "Shields at 12% and failing," the tactical officer yelled. "The EMP field is overwhelming us. Hull breach on decks 9 through 14. "Weapons are offline," another shouted. "We can't fight back." Yvonne watched as her last escort frigate was swarmed and torn apart. They were alone. She knew what she had to do. "All remaining power to the main engines," she ordered, her voice cold as the void. "Prepare for ramming speed. We will not die for nothing." Just as the helmsman was about to confirm the suicidal order, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Ma'am, Priority 1 data burst. It's from the stasis. It's from Kaelen's team. They got it. The shield harmonic data." A single, impossible spark of hope ignited in the dying command center. Yvonne's eyes snapped to her chief engineer. "Deploy it," she commanded, her voice a roar. "Routing all remaining power to the shield emitters. Uploading the harmonic. God, Emperor, let this work!" On the main viewer, the Indomitable's shields, flickering and dying a weak blue, sputtered out completely. For a heart-stopping second, the ship was naked before the enemy. The lead Arcseed unleashed a torrent of drones. And then it happened. A flash of brilliant, searing white light erupted from the ship. It wasn't a shield. It was a star. A new, stable, unbelievably powerful energy field wrapped around the Indomitable, glowing with the intensity of a forge. The EMP waves from the Scourge washed over it, not even causing a ripple. The first wave of drones slammed into the new shield and were instantly vaporized, their matter turned to dust. A stunned silence fell over the bridge, broken by a single disbelieving cry from the tactical officer. Shields at 100%, stable and holding. The EMP has no effect." The crew erupted into a deafening cheer. Yvonne allowed herself a grim, triumphant smile. She raised her head, her voice ringing with absolute authority. "All power to forward plasma cannons," she commanded. "Target the lead Arcseed. Show them what a real warship can do." The Indomitable, silent for so long, came back to life. Its massive spinal cannon glowed with a furious energy it hadn't been able to muster before. A beam of pure, concentrated plasma, white-hot and as wide as a skyscraper, lanced across space. It struck the lead Arcseed dead center. The creature's grotesque hull cracked, then shattered, and a chain reaction tore it apart from the inside. The Scourge vessel, a monster that had consumed worlds, detonated in a glorious, silent fireball. For the first time in the war, the Scourge had been pushed back. On the bridge of the stasis, the crew watched the encrypted battle data stream in. They saw the Indomitable shields reborn. They saw the Arcseed destroyed. A wave of cheers and cries of relief filled the room. The Confederate officers looked at Task Force Fenrir, their expressions a mix of gratitude and pure, unadulterated awe. Yvonne's face appeared on their screen. The background behind her was still chaotic, but her face was calm, her eyes alight with a victorious fire. She looked past Kaelen directly at Riggs. "Colonel," she said, and for the first time there was genuine respect in her voice, "your methods have been noted and approved. On behalf of a grateful Confederacy, you have our thanks." She then turned to Kaelen. "Technician, Project Chimera is now our highest priority. You have full authority. Give Colonel Riggs and his team whatever they need." The transmission ended. The political debate was over. The alliance had been forged not in a council chamber, but in the heart of a ship-fight battle. A week later, Kaelen stood in a design lab aboard the now-repaired stasis. The room was a chaotic fusion of two cultures. Sleek Confederate holotables stood next to human-style whiteboards covered in handwritten equations and crude drawings. He felt more alive than he had in years. He wasn't alone.
Glitch was seated at a console, her fingers flying as she coded a new, unhackable but brutally effective fire control system. They were designing a new class of warship. The hologram floating between them was a testament to their new alliance. It had the powerful reactor core of a Confederate dreadnought, but it was encased in thick, heavy layers of physical armor. And instead of elegant plasma cannons, its spine was lined with massive, brutally oversized kinetic railguns and racks of chemically propelled missiles. Riggs and Bulk walked in. Bulk looked at the design, grunted in approval. More ammo. Good. Riggs stood beside Kaelen, looking at the monstrous, ugly, beautiful ship on the display. He clapped a heavy hand on Kaelen's shoulder, a gesture that no longer felt alien. "See, Doc," Riggs said, a rare, tired grin spreading across his face. "When your toys don't work, you just need a bigger hammer." And that hammer was only the first tool they forged together. The real war has just begun. The journey for Kaelen and the Task Force Fenrir will be fraught with peril. Can they truly trust each other when facing new evolutions of the Scourge? Will the conservative factions within the Confederacy try to sabotage them from the shadows? All of these questions will be answered in the chapters to come. If you want to be the first to find out those answers and want to continue exploring this universe with us, your like would be a massive morale boost. And make sure to hit subscribe to Enlist with the Fleet so you'll be ready for the next battle. See you on the front lines.